So today, we're going to get into one of the most important, most fundamental evolutions in all of combat sports. We're talking about the fusion of striking and wrestling that really truly defines what modern mixed martial arts is all about. This was the question, right? The simple but absolutely brutal question that launched an entire sport. The early days of MMA, they were basically a laboratory designed to answer one thing: what is the single most effective martial art? And, well, the results? They were not what most people expected. In the beginning, it was all about specialists. You had your boxer, your karate guy, your wrestler. But then at UFC 1, this slender Brazilian jiu-jitsu expert named Royce Gracie comes along and he just systematically dismantles these bigger, stronger, more powerful strikers. The message couldn't have been clearer. If you're a pure striker and you can't stop the fight from hitting the mat, you are in a world of trouble. But the problem wasn't just about who had the better skills. No, it was actually built right into the way these fighters stood. Their very stances made them fundamentally vulnerable to each other. It was a real dilemma. Okay, so picture this. A fighter had to make a critical choice. Do you stand tall like a kickboxer? Great, you can throw kicks and defend your head, but your hips are just a giant blinking target for a takedown. So, okay, you get low in a wrestling stance. Now you're a perfect target for a knee right up the middle or an uppercut that'll put your lights out. It was a tactical nightmare. You're stuck. The sport just couldn't stay in this stalemate. It wasn't sustainable. So to survive, and really to thrive, fighters had to evolve. They had to move beyond being just a striker or just a grappler. They had to become true hybrids. And the solution wasn't really a compromise. It was a synthesis. The modern MMA stance, it finds this perfect neutral center of gravity. It's low enough that you can defend a takedown, but it's high enough that you can still strike effectively. Your hands are at a mid-level, ready to parry a punch or fight for an underhook. It's a platform that's built to handle absolutely anything. Now, here's what makes this hybrid stance so incredibly dangerous: the level change. When a fighter suddenly drops their elevation, what are they doing? Are they throwing a hook to the body, or are they shooting for your legs? That ambiguity, that split second of uncertainty, it imposes this huge cognitive load on the defender. It forces them to guess. And in a fight, if you're guessing, you're losing. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this all work in a real fight? I mean, how do the elite fighters use this hybrid platform to so seamlessly blend their attacks together? Well, here's the key. They never just shoot for a takedown from the outside. That is way too predictable. A good defender will see that coming a mile away. Instead, they use their strikes as a kind of smokescreen to create the perfect opportunity to close that distance and get in on the hips. Think about it for a second. When punches are flying at your head, what's your first instinct? You bring your hands up to protect yourself, right? Well, in that split second, your vision is blocked, your hips are wide open, and your weight shifts forward, making your feet feel like they're stuck in cement. It's nearly impossible to sprawl. The strikes literally create the perfect opening. And here's a classic example of how it's done. First, you land a hard 1-2 combo. You have to make your opponent respect your power. Then, you start conditioning them with these light, little probing jabs. Finally, you feint that same jab, but instead of throwing the punch, you change levels just as their hands come up to block. You're in on their legs before they even know what happened. It's beautiful. Of course, getting the takedown, that's only half the battle. Once the fight hits the ground, the synthesis continues with ground and pound. This is the ultimate expression of that wrestling-striking hybrid, and it was really pioneered by legends like Mark Coleman. But make no mistake, ground and pound isn't just about mindless smashing. It is highly tactical. Every dominant position offers these unique angles to deliver damage. From full mount, you can rain down these devastating vertical elbows. From side control, it's more about short, punishing strikes. It's a real science of controlled violence. So let's look at a couple of fighters who didn't just use these techniques. I mean, they perfected them. They became the true masters of this synthesis. First up, we have to talk about the legendary Georges St. Pierre, GSP. He was a fighter who turned this blend of striking and wrestling into a truly devastating art form. Now get this, despite not coming from a traditional high-level wrestling background, GSP has one of the highest takedown accuracy rates in UFC history at a staggering 74%. I mean, that's higher than credentialed masters like Khabib and Islam. So why? How? It's because his setups, using that world-class jab of his, were just about unstoppable. And it's not just me saying it. Fans and analysts who watched him for years all agree. For GSP, his striking and wrestling weren't two different skills. They were a continuous loop. The threat of one perfectly set up the other, and it left his opponents in this constant state of just reacting. Then you have Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, while JSP was all about that clean, perfectly timed surgical entry, Khabib's game was completely different. It was about relentless, suffocating, overwhelming pressure. For Khabib, the first takedown attempt was just the beginning of the end. He'd get his hands on you, he'd drive you to the cage, and then he would just apply his system of leg traps and head pressure. The threat of his grappling was so overwhelming that it created openings for his striking, like that famous overhand that dropped Conor McGregor. It all worked together. So the ultimate takeaway here is this. Elite MMA is no longer a contest between a striker and a grappler. It just isn't. It's a battle between two incredible athletes who have integrated these arts into a single, seamless system where every single move complements the other. This synthesis of impact and leverage, it has absolutely defined the modern era of the sport. Which leaves us with the big question, right? What comes next? What new, unforeseen blend of techniques is going to create the next big paradigm shift and define the future of combat?